Thank you so much. Welcome back. I hope you learned a lot in the breakout sessions and were able to connect with other industry leaders. I know that our sessions shared a lot of innovation, but also commended many of the previous speakers on their bravery, their willingness to try things out and evolve them to support people who have disabilities. I'm now going to ask everyone to please mute themselves and turn off their cameras until it is their turn to speak. And I'm going to introduce our next opportunity to share via a fireside chat. Connie Chu is the managing attorney of the Pathways to Work practice group at Disability Rights California, which focuses on addressing barriers to employment for people who have disabilities. Connie will be facilitating a fantastic conversation, and I am going to turn this over to her now so that she can introduce the members of the fireside chat.
Great. Thank you, Tanya. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. This is Connie. I'm a light-skinned Asian American woman with freckles. I have shoulder-length black hair with silver streaks, and I'm wearing a red blazer over a black top with a red and white circle pattern. Behind me is the bluish purple virtual background for the Building Better for the Future event. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm really thrilled to be introducing the speakers for our fireside chat. We will be hearing from Catherine Nichols, the Senior Director of Accessibility Programs at Salesforce, as well as Jenny Leigh Fleury, Chief Accessibility Officer for Microsoft. So I'm going to read a brief bio for each of you, and then we'll get into our questions. So first, Catherine Nichols is an experienced disability rights advocate and the Senior Director of Accessibility Programs at Salesforce. Catherine leads the Office of Accessibility, a team striving to ensure Salesforce's products, workplaces, and virtual experiences are accessible to all, empowering people with disabilities to succeed. She's also an active member and previous vice president of the Ability Force Employee Resource Group, a global network of employees with disabilities and their allies who work together to transform the perceptions and elevate the status of people with disabilities. Catherine went to Salesforce in 2006 to start their business continuity and crisis management programs with a background in risk management and computer information systems, previously working at both Ernst & Young and Intuit. Outside of work, Catherine lives in San Francisco with her husband, 3 daughters, and her curious kitten Snacks. You can connect with Catherine on Facebook, LinkedIn, under Catherine C. Nichols. We'll also be hearing from Jenny Leigh Fleury, who is the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft, leading the company's efforts to drive great products, services, and websites that empower people and organizations to achieve more. Her team is at the forefront of creating positive experiences that apply technology to make a difference in the world and the lives of individuals. From how Microsoft hires and supports people with disabilities employment to innovative technology that aims to revolutionize what's possible for people with disabilities. With the help of her team and broad community within Microsoft, Jenny leads many initiatives to empower people with disabilities, both inside and outside of Microsoft. At Microsoft, she founded the Disability Employee Resource Group and chaired it for 10 years, and also created the Disability Answer Desk, which provides specialist customer service support to people with disabilities, and they've handled over 1 million calls to date. Jenny also hosts the annual Microsoft Ability Summit, which focuses on empowering over 2,000 attendees with the inclusive and innovative thinking necessary to enable people around the world. Outside of Microsoft, Jenny's on the board of Gallaudet University and Team Gleason, and was recognized as a Disability Employment Champion of Change by the White House in October 2014. Jenny, Catherine, we're so pleased that you could join us today. And so we'll head into the first question. When you begin your answers, please give a visual description and also let us know your pronouns. So first topic we want to talk about is the disability divide. So Jenny, Microsoft has recently announced its 5-year commitment to addressing the disability divide, as you well know. Please tell us about the initiatives that you and your team are leading to expand accessibility.
Absolutely. So hi there, folks. Jenny Lake Flurry. I am a white female, brown hair, long hair. I'm wearing a yellow sweater with a multicolored black and white scarf, she, her. And in the background are some shelves in my office, one of which is a poster that says, "I love bacon." I digress. So let's talk about the disability divide. So Microsoft has been really, invested in accessibility since the 90s, and we've learned a lot in that time. But I think in many ways, I think we've learned more in the last year, 18 months about the world of disability than maybe in the last 10 or maybe more. The pandemic adding fuel to the fire in many ways. And I've spent the last 6 months, and a gang of us spent the last 6 months really digging into the research and what's happening to the disability community. And a few things just came to the front of that, which was that the number of people with disabilities is growing, and it's growing at a pretty screaming rate. We're all anticipating and waiting for the census results. We all linger on the World Health number of 1 billion around the world. We are expecting that to rise, and the pandemic has added to that, whether it's long COVID, direct impact of the pandemic, or indirect impact, just looking at the mental health statistics, which I'm sure you've covered in the last couple of days. Just good grief, almost 1,000% increase in screenings of anxiety and depression in the last year alone. We also spent some time really looking at the intersectionality, so the mix of race and disability, sexuality and disability, and what are the employment and education rates for people with disabilities, and then you compound that with intersectionality, and we were just like, good grief, there's so much here as well. And the blunt way of putting it is actually a phrase that World Bank coined in 2016, which was talking about the disability divide. And what we found was what they found, and sort of 5 years plus on that, which is that people with disabilities double the unemployment rate versus not. Education rates are impacted. Equal opportunities are not necessarily being given at the rates that we feel that they should. And while there's been incredible efforts over the last 30 years, they haven't manifested the level of change that we need to see to really cater to the talent of this community. And so our approach, bluntly working with many others, because it should never be one company, is to get after that and see what we can do to tackle the disability divide, whether that's in education, employment, play, whatever facets of life. There's 3 parts to it so far: really upping our bar in the nerdery, the technology. Nerdery is a great word. So whether that's technology, whether it's services, websites, whatever it is, upping the bar of what is possible, feasible with technology. And clearly that's our bread and butter. We're a technology company, but also tackling the talent pipeline, where we found so many blockages that need to be removed, to empower more talent with disabilities to get into higher ed, to get into employment, and also clearly continuing our own focus on workplace culture around the world, so that our representation of disability at Microsoft mirrors representation of disability around the world. So we're really getting after it in quite a concerted way, and upping our goals to get after this. I think it's never been more important.
Thank you, Jenny. Catherine, Salesforce is known as a leader in accessibility and has been named a best place to work for disability inclusion. Can you share with us, how are you and your team working to create a fair, equitable, and inclusive workplace for people with disabilities? And how do you define success?
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, my name is Catherine, and I am a white female in my mid-40s. I have highlighted blonde hair. I'm joining you from my office in San Francisco, and description behind me, if you can see it, there's a kind of traditional fire escape stairway behind me from a San Francisco Victorian. Yeah, I mean, we're a relatively new office here at Salesforce. The Office of Accessibility started about 1.5 years ago. And we've really followed a lot of the leadership of Microsoft, and thanks to Jenny and her generous team for offering us with perspective, guidance, what's worked well for them, what hasn't, and really helped us along the way. And that's something I'd love to highlight here, is that this takes the work of business, government, nonprofits, all sorts of communities and people to help with combating this unemployment gap that we have for people with disabilities. And what I really appreciate about this work is that even competing tech companies can come together to help solve these problems and work together, because our greatest interest is really elevating the lives of people with disabilities and creating pathways to meaningful employment. Like Jenny mentioned, not only from just hiring within Salesforce, but also how do we hire across companies, and how do we work at the education level and from the beginning of the process all the way to the employment portion, right? And so, like Microsoft, we're working from the education part. I mean, I come from a background of computer information systems, and when I went to school and in my engineering classes, I was never once told about how to design with inclusivity or with accessibility in mind. And so we're working with partners, and I think Microsoft is part of this as well, with the Teach Access program. And seeing how we can embed accessibility and inclusion into the college curriculum as one aspect. Another area that we're working on is making sure that Salesforce is a great place to work for people with disabilities, that we have outstanding accommodations programs, that we have inclusive recruiting, that we provide accessible business technology to run our everyday work and our business, and that we enable our managers and our teams to work with all types of groups of people and get different perspectives from everyone, because we know that we're a better business if we include more people within the business and in the design and execution of our products. And like Microsoft, we launched an accessibility support desk as well to help our customers with their accessibility cases, and also help our customers build accessible platforms and applications on our Salesforce products. And another area that we're working on too, as I mentioned, that we can't do this alone. We have a great Salesforce ecosystem. So we have all of these customers and partners who are utilizing Salesforce to run their business successfully. And they need Salesforce admins to do that within their own companies. So we have a partnership with the Blind Institute of Technology, who's a certified Salesforce training and certification provider for becoming Salesforce admins. And so what we do is we have grants for on-the-job experience for their students and their professionals and their and those who become certified through their program to learn and put on their job resume experience of being a Salesforce admin at one of our nonprofit companies, with the plan of being hired into the Salesforce ecosystem full-time as a Salesforce admin. And we're continuing to work on expanding that program to different disabilities and global groups as well.
Thank you. I really love those comments about not being able to do it alone, which applies certainly within your two very large companies, but also really across within the sector. You know, I appreciate your comments, Catherine, about really appreciating the leadership of Jenny and other people who've been doing this a long time. And so I think in that spirit, you know, one thing that comes up is clearly this is not a one person, one team effort within your companies. And so, you know, I'm wondering if you could comment, we'll have maybe Catherine go first. You know, both of your companies have CEOs who have spoken very publicly about the importance of disability inclusion in the workplace. So can you talk about the role of CEO engagement in making this kind of transformational change that we're really seeking in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes a whole village, right? And it does come from the top down. And we wouldn't be here today with an Office of Accessibility if it wasn't for Mark Benioff, our CEO, making a public commitment to making accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities part of the Salesforce business. It was a grassroots effort by our Ability Force employee resource group, people with disabilities and our allies, saying that we can't do this as volunteers or as a side job at Salesforce, but we really need to make it a key part of our business. And not only because it's the right thing to do, but it is the best thing for our business and for our customers. And so we did need Mark's leadership in making that commitment, and not only making that commitment internal to Salesforce, but making it a public commitment. We've done that through our Valuable 500 partnership, as well as through Disability In with our CEO commitment. And Disability In does a disability equality index review, and we have conducted that. This will be our third year of conducting that, and we learn a lot from that review to really see where we're doing well and where we need to make improvements across the company. And similar to Microsoft, we're a hub and spoke model of this Office of Accessibility, and so we work to influence teams all across Salesforce to make accessibility part of their daily business, whether that's real estate, events, human resources, products, recruiting, whatever it may be. And so this Disability Equality Index helps us help those teams own and become responsible for accessibility within their own areas of the business.
Jenny?
Yeah, I do vehemently think that in order to create a culture of accessibility, which is what you need to do within any company, within any environment, bluntly, and a culture that's sustainable and durable. So it's not about one person in a role, it's about it being endemic within the systems and processes, right? Inclusion has to be methodically thought of every day to ensure that you achieve that bar. And that really does require a lot of process and mechanics. But I also think the supportive leadership and also the bottoms up, making sure that you really are empowering that community is so crucial to it. We've been very, I think, fortunate. You know, one of the proudest things that I've done in 16 years at Microsoft was really helping to curate and form and then chair, and I'm now a sponsor of the disability employee group. And I remember very nervously sending an email to Satya in 2012, so nearly 10 years ago now, when he was not CEO, saying, would you like to be an executive sponsor? And I, you know, it's one of those emails that I wrote and I was like, ooh. I probably procrastinated a couple of days before I hit send, but I hit send and he replied within minutes. And he's like, yeah, let's meet. And it's one of those meetings that I will never forget, because I planned it methodically. I had the deck ready. I had it timed. I'd rehearsed it. And he walks in and he goes, no, let's not do that. Tell me, fill me in. And he wanted to know all about the community. And he wanted to know, you know, the perspective of folks in our blind community, or mobility, or autism, or mental health, and really walk through that, and then walk through the technology and where we had opportunities, and walk through our buildings, and ended up being this incredible conversation. And I think the curiosity that he had and the opportunity he saw was to take that up. And clearly he wrote about his personal just tied to disability in Hit Refresh, his book. He is a parent of a kid with cerebral, he's not a kid anymore, but he's a parent, a 20-something with cerebral palsy, and he and his wife have just done an amazing amount for Seattle and the Pacific Northwest when it comes to that, and some recent donations that sort of blew all of our minds. So clearly invested, impassioned for this space. But I would say that spread, you know, that was 10 years ago. And so what excites me is that this isn't just something that is about one person. It is about, you speak to every single leader. In fact, we had 6 of the senior leadership team speaking at Ability Summit just a month ago. whether it was the head of gaming, because yeah, we love to game, or it was the head of Microsoft Teams, or whoever we are so fortunate to have that level of support and their support to make sure that it's embedded into their processes, their measurement, their metrics, everything that they do. It is a core part of. So I do think that culture is so critically important to it.
I know we have another topic, but a follow-up question that comes to mind following your comments, Jenny, is, for both of you, what might you suggest? I really appreciate your comment about, when you had this conversation, he was not yet CEO, but what comments might you have for colleagues, whether it's in the tech sector or others, who feel like that's not where their company is, where they maybe don't have the CEO engagement or not publicly. So maybe just some brief comments on that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, because I must get that several times a day, and there are moments where I don't feel, we all kind of go, oh, I don't have that person doesn't get it yet. It's a really common question. One, I would say send the mail, because you never know that person's understanding, interest, passion. Again, disability, over 70% invisible. I didn't know that Satya was that invested in this on a personal level. You've got to send the mail, and then meet people where they're at. We very much we have a maturity model actually that we built over time that sort of allows us to assess the maturity of different parts of the company. And that means that sometimes I'm meeting people at this end of the spectrum, and other times I'm meeting people at that end of the spectrum. But have the conversation, and always ground it in the experience of people with disabilities, customers and employees. Bring it back to that, because that's what this is. This is not about meeting a tick box in a piece of legal regular, meeting the nuts and bolts of a. This is about driving processes, technologies that will empower people and keep people at the core of everything you do. Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on it right there, is the storytelling, right? The human factor, the storytelling of we're all connected to someone in our lives that has a disability. And the more that we tell our stories, the more that we open up storytelling and trust and availability for others to tell us their experiences and their stories. And so, just keep trying, keep storytelling, and keep trying different ways to connect with various people at your company, and you will get momentum through storytelling.
So we just have a few more minutes. So our final question, and whoever would like to can address this first. We've talked about, both Microsoft and Salesforce being part of the tech sector. What opportunities do you see within this industry as a result of increased inclusion of people with disabilities?
Do you want me to go first? Go ahead, Jenny.
I can go. So many, it's utterly ridiculous. I think if I look back on what we've learned, and we've learned what to do and what not to do, and I think both are as equally important. You've got to take some risks, and you've got to fail fast and move on. But we have taken some risks, and we've invested in really empowering people to grow their knowledge on inclusive design, grow their knowledge of how to build technologies that work with and for people with disabilities, including people with disabilities in that design process. And I would say we've learned it mechanically from how to build it into products, whether it's Windows, Office, and also how to hack. We have thousands of Microsofties that hack every summer. In fact, they hack throughout the year. And some of our greatest innovations have come from those projects. And they're often, the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which was something that was designed for people with disabilities, in fact, veterans in the beginning, came out of a hackathon project. Seeing AI, which is a simple app that you can download on a fruity device to empower people who are blind to see, get captions for images. If I was holding a picture of you up, Connie, it would tell me who you are, female. It would give me a description of who you are in your face and your expression and an estimate of age, which is sometimes not accurate. So all of those projects have come out of designing with and through and for. And so I think it speaks to the opportunity that we have. I'd say one of the biggest things that we're doing right now is making sure that, again, based on the feedback of our employees, is that accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities. In fact, it's a responsibility of everyone. And so people with disabilities are receiving inaccessible stuff and having to navigate inaccessible stuff every day. Why? That shouldn't be possible in this day and age, but it is. So simple things like in Outlook and Office today, we have an accessibility checker that checks your document and gives you guidance on how to make that accessible. Whether you know there's a person with a disability or not, you should be using this. We're actually turning it on by default in the background so everyone can see. They have to ignore the messages in order to send an inaccessible mail. And if you're sending a large email in Outlook right now, it will prompt you, are you sure you want to send this inaccessible mail? Maybe slightly different wording than that, but it's that I think is all being informed. And bluntly, you've got a talent pool that's untapped. We know right now that over 6.1% of our US employees have a disability. We know that it's way bigger than that. Those are the ones that have self-identified. This is an incredible talent pool. If you empower it, you will deliver great nerdery. And if you empower it, you're going to get a much more active, engaged, infused culture within your company, within your everything. So yes, anyway, Catherine, I'm sure you've got other thoughts. I can keep going. I'll shut up.
I love listening to you. So no, we could have another session where I just sit and soak it all in. So thank you. So yeah, another perspective is different than the tech one of just the human aspect, which is, you know, the intersectionality. And I heard it mentioned in this session earlier too, of you know, this discrimination of people with disabilities, and then you add a person of color, and then you add a female to that, and then you add the aspect of people who are back in the office and those that are working from home, and you're just adding layer and layer of bias and discrimination. And it's just it's really important to look at all of those levels and the bias that we have, and really face that and address that, especially when we're in leadership, especially when we're looking at employment, when we're looking at pay gaps, and the discrimination that comes with that. And at Salesforce, we have a pay gap strategy of looking across the entire company and making sure that people are being paid fairly, and that when there is an idea of discrimination and a pay gap that's taking place, that we're looking across the company at that when it comes to promotions and pay, and trying to even things out where there may have been a bias or a discrimination in place. And we know that that's not only the work that we need to do when it comes to pay, but also bias that's introduced into the recruiting process, into the onboarding process, into what I mentioned, promotions and career development. And because that is definitely an area of work, and it starts from the very beginning of women in tech, people with disabilities in tech, and learning that in college or in school. And we're seeing more and more of these STEM programs for girls, STEM programs for women and people of color. And we need to make sure that disability is part of that equation as well.
Thank you. Well, to echo what Catherine's comment, I could definitely sit and listen to both your comments all day. I would love to, but I know, you know, following along with this, actually, we have our next session. So I just want to say thank you so much for spending so much time with us. And the great news is that you're both very available on the World Wide Web, so people can hear many more of your comments by just looking you up. And so we really are so grateful for your leadership and really your your encouragement as we continue on in this space. So I'm just going to make a general closing remark to thank everybody who's been participating this morning, and to encourage everyone to join us for the next and final session, which is Building Back Better for the Future. So I think it's a great way to wrap up the summit, and that will be beginning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So folks have a little moment for a break. But thank you again, Jenny and Catherine in particular, and then of course all the speakers before. And it was really a pleasure and a joy to be together with you. So thank you, everyone. And we'll hopefully see many of you in a short 24 minutes. Bye.
This would not have been possible without the hard work of our planning committee and staff. The planning committee partners were Sherry Byrne-Haber, Arturo Casares, Robert Chavez, Pamela Cohen, Mark Ehrlichman, David Fazio, Deborah Jorgensen, Amy Lawson, Philip Luang, Tanya Morwick, Olivia Rayner, Steve Reuter, Susan Senior, Nicholas Waverin, and Brian Winfield. We also want to thank the DRC staff. We want to thank the communications team, Connie Chu, Christina Fleeton, Eric Harris, Rebecca Hoyt, Vivian Wan, Jesse Lara, Andy Imparato, Karen Mercado, Lisa Navarro, Aisa Novoski, Vanessa Ochoa, Jenny Olson, and Dylan Wilson. And I know there's many, many more. Thank you.